the first session of cabinet under President John Dramani Mahama. As you may be aware, cabinet is an important decision-making body of government, perhaps the most important. And every president is required by the Constitution to compose a cabinet. And that cabinet, once composed, must begin regular meetings to fashion out policy and determine the direction of governance. So, as a first requirement, President Mahama has composed his cabinet. And as you may be aware, the constitutional requirement is that cabinet must be made up of 19 ministers. And so the first point of business is to put together this body of 19 ministers, chaired by the president himself. And I would proceed to announce the names of the 19 ministers who form the cabinet. First on the list is the Minister for Finance, the Minister for the Interior, Minister for Health, Minister for Defense, the Attorney General and Minister for Justice, the Minister for Energy and Green Transition, the Minister for Education, the Minister for Trade, Agribusiness and Industry, Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Minister for Food and Agriculture, Minister for Communication, Digital Technology and Innovations, the Minister for Roads and Highways, Minister for Environment, Science and Technology, Minister for Works, Housing and Water Resources, Minister for Local Government, Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs, Minister for Gender, Children and Social Protection, Minister for Transport, Minister for Labor, Jobs and Employment. So these are the 19 ministers who form cabinet together with the president. Now, apart from these 19 ministers, other ministers are made to attend. And so you find that the description for that would be in attendance. So the following ministers were in attendance at cabinet today. So the Minister of Sports and Recreation, the Minister of Youth Development and Empowerment, the Minister for Fisheries and Aquaculture, Minister for Tourism, Culture and Creative Arts, Minister of State in charge of special initiatives, and my good self, the Minister for State responsible for government communications, the Minister of State for Climate Change and Sustainability, and Minister of State Public Sector Reforms. So this essentially is the composition of those who attended cabinet today, in addition to the cabinet ministers. Now, today's session primarily was to introduce cabinet and ensure that people have a handle on what exactly the expectation is of them in cabinet. The ground rules were set out, and important briefings on matters relating to governance took place. There were a number of briefings. The first, of course, as should be expected, was a briefing on security, the state of security in the country. So the Minister for the Interior, the Minister for Defense, and the National Security Coordinator took turns to brief cabinet on the security situation in the country. And the general view emanating from the briefing was that Ghana's security was strong. We are a safe country, and people are free to go about their normal activities without let or hindrance. And whatever threats exist, our security agencies have the capacity to deal with. So Ghana was declared safe from the briefings that were made at cabinet today. The second briefing was made by the presidential advisor on the 24-hour economy and accelerated export development, Mr. Guzitano. He briefed cabinet on preparations so far towards a full rollout of the 24-hour economy. And one was left with the impression that tremendous work had gone into what is arguably President Mahama's foremost transformation plan which aims to convert the Ghanaian economy from its present state into one that never sleeps and works around the clock. The briefing from Mr. Tano and his team shows, I beg your pardon, that we are on course to ensuring a smooth takeoff. And in due course, the 24-hour secretariat would be engaging the Ghanaian media so that through you, they can apprise the people of Ghana as to where things stand. And the president and everybody else in cabinet was highly confident that based on the roadmap that had been established, we were on course to achieving the objective of having a 24-hour economy. The final briefing was made by the minister responsible for finance. As you may be aware, we campaigned strongly on Ghana's failing economy. And indeed, our fears were borne out when the finance minister made his briefing. The situation is dire. The numbers are even worse than we had known in the period of the elections. But the minister, the president, and others involved in the management of the economy were confident that the proposals, the policy propositions, and the program that President Mahama has put on the table were sufficient to turn around the situation and lift the pall of economic hardship and despair that has hung over this country and its people all these years under the new Patriotic Party, where economic mismanagement and imprudent decision-making was commonplace. In a few days' time, President Mahama will be addressing Parliament. He will be delivering a message on the state of the nation to Parliament, and he will take the opportunity to delve deep into our current economic state, what we inherited, and what plans there are going forward to ensure economic revival and resuscitation. A few days after that, the National Economic Dialogue will take place from the 3rd to 4th March, and there too, various stakeholders in our economy, drawn from academia, civil society organizations, public servants, public officials, and other interested parties in the Ghanaian economy will meet to deliberate on the state of affairs. And there too, further insights will be shared on the state of the economy and how we can collectively achieve consensus on the steps that need to be taken to ensure that we get out of the situation and are on the road to rapid economic growth and development. And then on the 11th of March, the finance minister will present his first budget, which would again explain the situation and indicate what government's policies are in respect of the economy and what measures will be rolled out going forward to achieve the objective of getting us out of this economic mess. So this, in a nutshell, is what transpired in cabinet today. I would pause here and invite questions from the media present. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I would welcome them at this stage.
The first one has to do with security. You said the briefing that His Excellency the President had some assurances that the country was safe and that everything with respect to security was, for want of a better word, top-notch. But we know the situation in Boku, the Wale enclave is nothing to write home about. That cannot be described as we being in the safe, so to speak, space.
Well, those are isolated incidents of chieftaincy, Kumlan conflicts. And at the cabinet session today, the security chiefs were on hand to provide an update on the steps that have been taken to, as it were, bring the situation under control and ensure that they do not recur. So all that was part of the briefing. If you take out those isolated cases of conflict, which in any event predate the coming into power of this government and have been raging for decades in some instances. The general security situation is safe, and one can be confident that we can go about our activities peacefully as a people.
Do we get a sense as to what approach the government wants to have with the issue on the conflict around that area?
I think that President Mahama himself has indicated that he remains committed to resolving disputes such as the Boku conflict and others that are in various parts of the country. He has spoken about the need to use dialogue and stakeholder engagement as a tool towards achieving lasting peace in these areas, in addition to deploying security measures, deploying intelligence measures to ensure that early warning signals are picked up and they are attended to expeditiously to forestall the outbreak of violence. And where there is some outbreak of violence, we respond rapidly to bring it under control, to preserve life and property.
My question is on energy. You mentioned that the energy minister is part of cabinet. I want to find out, WAPCO announced that it was starting with its PN exercise, I think, some days ago. And we were told that fuel had been procured to make up for the shortfall that was expected. In recent times, we've heard some complaints about intermittent power supply in some parts of the country. And if you scan through social media, you get that concern as well. I want to find out if the issue of intermittent power supply, as has been suggested on social media, came up at this meeting, and what has been done to resolve the challenge, if there is any.
What I can say is that the energy minister is aware of the situation, and in the coming days he will be engaging the public on what the threats that we faced at the very onset of this government, which related to the closure of the West African gas pipeline and the failure of the previous government to meet its obligation of providing fuel for thermal power generation, was averted. Government has brought in adequate supplies of fuel, but it is important from time to time to engage the public to address concerns that they may have with the power situation. The Energy Ministry will be doing that in the coming days.
Okay, Minister, my question has to do with the Closac strike. We saw the Labour Minister part of today's meeting. Is it the case that that issue didn't come up? And if indeed it came up, what was the response to that issue?
Well, what I'm aware of is that today's meeting involving the tripartite committee, at which the finance minister, the labor minister, and in fact the president were present, discussed the fixing of the minimum wage and the termination of the base pay. That was the agenda of the meeting that was held this morning. As for the Closac strike, I think government's position has been made clear through the briefing that I made yesterday, and I do not anticipate that it will change. Thank you very much for coming.